Glad to be here to talk about salt. I'll make some introduction to what it is and what you can use it for. So salt is primarily a remote execution framework, which means it's a tool that lets you execute code from one machine on a lot of others, or just one other, depending on what you want to do. And it's a set of tools that are built around that framework. So one of those tools, which is quite important, is config management, but you can also use it to do provisioning, to do monitoring, that kind of stuff. So who here is using config management? So the majority of you. What tools are you using? Maybe you're using Puppet or Chef or Salt. Well, it's installed somewhere, and sometimes you run stuff with it. I see that Tolef is using everything.
Not Ansible. Well, I'm not using Ansible. We are. Flamefest.
Yeah.
They're all terrible.
Yeah, including Salt, I'm sure. I mean, they all have lots of good things and lots of drawbacks. So why would you use Salt? First, it's written in Python, so if you're a Python shop like Logilab is, then that's a pretty interesting point, because it means you can hack it without having to learn yet another language. It uses YAML for describing the states and the stuff that you I mean, most of the data that is built on is using YAML, at least by default. So it's not a DSL like Chef or Puppet are using. It's some reasonably standard language. It has a lot of documentation. It has quite a big user community, and also contributors. It's moving quite fast. There's a lot of development activity going on. Yeah. So there are also reasons not to use it. One of them is that it's written in Python, so if you don't like that, then you're probably better off with something else. It's also a young project, so I mean, getting more mature, but the fact that it's still fast-moving means there's a lot of stuff going in. Some of it is stable and mature, and some of it less so. So you have to keep up with the development. And one of the controversial aspects is that it doesn't use something like SSH for the communication between the machines. It has its own protocol based on 0MQ, and does its own crypto and authentication on top of that. Yes, Martin.
Hello. Just wanted to add one thing. It also rolls its own Python module loader.
What could possibly go wrong? And one other reason not to use it is if you're very happy with your current config management, which you probably aren't, because, like Tolef said, they're all terrible. So before we go into the details, we'll have to talk a bit about terminology, because obviously, since it's yet another config management system, it has its own terminology. So usually you have one master, which is the machine that has all that controls all of your other systems. And those other systems are called minions. So yeah, usually you have only one master and 1 to 1,000 of minions. Yeah, you can also have a more complicated topology if you need that. So the way that works on the network level is that the minions open a connection to the master, so you don't have to open any new ports on the minions. And then they wait for stuff to do, and then when they execute stuff, they return the results back to the master asynchronously, so you can run a command on 1,000 minions, and you don't have you get the results back as they come in. Another word that is needed is the grain of salt. It's static data that is on each minion. So, for example, this. No, it's here. Okay. Virtual. Hey, GNOME. Put that here. No, it doesn't want to. Fuck. No, it doesn't. Whatever. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, no, that's still. Hmm? Yeah, any day now. Yay. So I have two minions. They are both responding, and one of them is my laptop, so it's both a master and minion, and the other is a VM. And I can ask the VM to tell me what its grains are, and it's stuff like which version of Salt is running, which kind of machine is it, whether it's physical or it's a VM, and it's running Debian Wheezy, etc. So you know a bunch of stuff about the minion, its IP addresses, its architecture, stuff like that. And yeah, no, that doesn't work. Yay. Some other data that you have is the pillars. The pillars are data that, contrary to the grains, are present on the master and that apply differently to each minion. So each minion has its own pillar that are given to it by the master. And then on the config management side, you have states, which are descriptions of what you want to do or what state you want the minion to be in. You have a top file which describes which states apply to which minion, or which pillars apply to which minion. There's another top file for the pillars. And there's the notion of a high state, which is go and apply all my states to this minion or to these minions. So it's some kind of take all my description of states and go run that and wait a while and see that it's all done. So normally the high state should be idempotent. So if you run it twice, the second time should just say, oh, I'm already in the right state, and there's nothing to do. So how can you add a minion? You install the salt minion package. It's present in Wheezy backposts, but there are probably newer versions on the saltstack.com servers, which are maintained by the same guy who is doing the Debian package, so should be pretty much okay. They also have some shell script that you can curl and pipe sudo bash, and let's not talk about that. Then once you have installed the minion, you need to tell it where the master is. By default, it looks for salt. And then you start the minion, and it will go try to connect to the master. But since the master doesn't know about it, you need to check that the public key that it sends to the master is the right one. And then once you accept that public key, you're good to go. So what kind of stuff can we run? We can run some ping, which is the minion running and responding, and is the communication with the master okay? You can run any arbitrary shell command or Python code or whatever else. And one pretty important thing is that you don't have to run a command on every minion. You can run, you can use either shell globbing or regex or filter by grain or by pillars to say I want to run this command only on this set of minions. So for example, here I run the grains.item kernel release command only on my minions who are running Jessie. So in my two minions, one is running Wheezy, one is running Jessie, and we'll see that the master will see that it only applies to one of them. There's a number of other functions like this that you can run, either to, install packages, create users, create databases, or just get information. I mean, some of them do stuff on the minion, some of them just read information. There's a mixture of things, and you can write your own, because these are just Python functions. So you can add some more functions there, and they will be synced from the master to the minion, and you can run them just as if they were built into Salt. So on the config management part, by default, you will describe the states that you want on using YAML. And you can use Jinja for templating. So that means you can have variables either based on grains or other things that you can run on the, or any actually any salt function that you can run on the minions. Or you can have loops, you can have conditionals, and it gives a lot of power, which comes with some complexity, but there's a balance here. And so the grains and pillars that I talked about, they are available both for targeting which state should I apply to which minion, and also they are available inside Jinja for the templating. So either for templating the state files or even other files that you want to push to the minions. For example, if I want to push some Apache config file, I may have some differences between the minions, and I will use the same template, and the minion will do the work of replacing the template stuff with the right values. So how do I target my minions? So I have this top file which says, okay, my common state applies to everyone, and my Apache state applies to the minions whose role is web server. So what does my common state do? It says I need to install the vim, less, and depsums packages. I may want to template that to say the depsum package only applies to the Debian hosts and not to the Red Hat ones. Since there is a grain that tells me whether some machine is Windows or Red Hat, Debian based, I can do that. I can do that either here in the SLS file or using different SLS files and targeting in the top file. So I can have some more complicated SLS files. Assuming that I have for every machine which is a web server, I tell it, okay, you are serving this and this and this vhost. I can access this data in my SLS file and say, okay, I have the Apache 2 package installed, and it's also I also make sure that the Apache 2 service is running and that it's restarted whenever I changed one of these vhost files. So this is incomplete because I need to define what this file contains, but this kind of idea of replacing some template with the data, and since the master can serve as a file server, I can have the template on the master and say, okay, and tell the minion, okay, you will get the template from here and replace the variables in it. So some other nice things that Salt provides is integration with cloud or virtualization APIs. So it can talk to OpenStack and other stuff like that. You need to give it some credentials, and it will know where to find stuff. Which will allow you to provision your VMs and actually it will pre-generate the Minion's key, pre-accept it on the master, and then when the VM goes up, it will be able to already run a high state, for example, and be in the right with the right configuration. It can also talk to libvirt with a Whoa. So here it knows about the libvirt that is running on my laptop, and it knows that there is one running VM and a bunch of shut down ones. It can create new VMs from a template, from an image. It can manage these ones. And so this Wheezy1 minion that showed up in the test.ping earlier, it's one of these hosts that can be managed with solvirt. I can get documentation on any salt module or function with this -d option. So for example, if I want to see some info about my Wheezy1 VM, yeah, if I tell it which VM, it will be better here. Yay. Okay, so it tells me about its network address, its graphics, its disks, and stuff like that, which I could get through libvirt directly, but Salt gives a unified way and a programmatic way to work with this. One thing that one can use this with is you can write your own returners, which are what should the minion do with the data. So by default, it returns it to the master, but I could have some application that needs this kind of data inside a database or stuff like that for monitoring, for managing my VMs. So this is also an API that is provided by Salt. So I guess that's all I have for this overview, and now if you have any questions.
Thank you. You said that Salt is a young and fast-moving project. Yeah. You gave us some points that might want to make you consider strongly whether you want to use Salt, including that own crypto stuff. If you've been involved in the project for a long time, and I would be interested to hear your opinion on whether these core design issues that you're talking about, crypto, the Python module loader, and some other things, whether you think they're going to get resolved, because they're old issues.
Yeah. So there's a way to use salt or SSH instead of using the default protocol, but apparently it's
Very slow.
it's not quite as scalable because that's really the core of their own protocol, is that you really can scale to thousands of minions, and they can, I mean, they open their connection to the master when they need to, and it just works, which is probably not the case with Salt SSH. And so I'm not sure, I mean, they know about these issues. It doesn't seem to be a priority to...
That's really my question.
Yeah.
You've been in the project longer than I have, and what's your feeling, you know? I mean, it's not a priority. They are happy with their M2 crypto self-cooked thing.
I don't know if they're
not
happy with it, but they
But
I mean, it's not a priority to...
not a priority.
Yeah.
So given that, do you think that it makes sense to use salt?
I think there's enough people using it now that there's going to be, or there has been, review of their protocol by, I mean, I hope that I mean, there have been some reviews of Salt, there have been some CVs, but you know, the crypto stuff, I don't know if it's, I mean, how much it has seen, how much review it has seen.
Hello. I was wondering, like, is there a specific reason that you selected Salt instead of, say, Ansible, which seems to be very similar, but has some that does not have some of the downsides you mentioned?
I heard Martin talk about Ansible, and it wasn't very
So Martin
positive.
doesn't like Ansible. Okay.
Apparently, I mean, the Ansible project is basically a one-man show, from what I understand, which... Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't want to hijack anything, but
Yeah,
Ansible
no
is
problem.
well funded. It's a real company. I mean, there are plenty of people working on it. It's not like it's a one-man show. It's,
Okay.
I don't know. I started, or I am involved in maintaining it in Debian. This is why I'm, you know, kind of plugging it here.
Yeah, I started using Salt, I think, 2 years ago, something like that, and... Okay.
So yeah, I am also wondering like which to use, whether to be Salt or Ansible. But besides that, I'm also wondering if the management for virtualization crosses over from KVM or you know to other virtualization technologies.
I know there's some integration with stuff like Vagrant and Docker. I'm not using those, so I'm not very familiar with them, but I know that exists, and people use Salt to manage their Docker instances and stuff like that.
If you're wondering what you should use, I'm going to give a lightning talk tomorrow about configuration management.
Cool. Nice.
Hello. One of the problems I see with basically all the automation solutions today that include a central component is that if you manage to own that central component, you can basically do anything to all the hosts. Does Salt have any way of protecting you against that by using like signed YAML files or similar solution?
Not as far as I know.
To some degree, that's a, sorry? To some degree, it's a difficult problem to solve just because even if you have the program check signed YAML files, if someone has root on your master system, then you're pretty screwed anyway because they can just modify the program to not read the signature. There are some techniques of dealing with it, SSH keys. For example, you could simply use agent forwarding and not have the SSH key local to the central machine. But it's going to be hard to get around the fact as long as you have a centralized host.
I mean, you could run Ansible in a decentralized way. Like, you don't have to have a traditional master node. Say again?
Could we stay with salt and not arguing about salt and squid and all stuff? I think it's...
Oh, sorry.
Speaking of decentralized management, can you describe a workflow with Salt that you would use for, maybe a single node or multi-nodes without a master? Is that possible?
Can you repeat that? I'm not sure I understood the
Yeah,
question.
my question was essentially, how would you use Salt in a decentralized environment? Could you use it without a master, or is it explicitly required?
No, you can use it without a master. You can run commands on the minions itself, on the minion itself, without a master. So you can stay. If you have just one node, if you have a minion on it, you can give it some SLS files or stuff like that, and tell it, okay, go and run that.
You don't even need the minion to do that. There's salt call.
Yeah,
it
salt
just goes
call.
through Python and then executes the recipes. And the thing about signing your recipes and making, you asked about that, and making sure that you have some sort of controlled state. The way to do all of this, whether it's a centralized or decentralized version, is to use Git actually. So Salt can pull directly out of Git. It has that built in. It just gets the stuff straight from a tag, for instance. And that's also how you would do decentralized. So you would push all the Git repositories to your minions, or they would synchronize with each other, and then they would simply just with cron call on that data set, call themselves.
Well, then you still have the problem of if someone gets into your Git repo and puts stuff in it,
Yeah.
I mean, they can run any code that they want on all your machines. So.
That's one issue, and another one issue. I don't use Salt at the moment, but I was planning to say something like I push description file to the minions. Then the problem is you probably are going to push a lot of information on all your hosts, and it could be an issue. You may disclose a lot of information on those hosts.
I mean, you can put all the like the secret stuff or the restricted stuff. You can put it in the pillars, and then it's only sent to the minions that are listed for that. All the states can be read, and all the files can be read by all minions, but the pillars are only available to the minions that are targeted.
Hi. Supposing I wanted to adopt, configuration management throughout an enterprise with Salt, what should I put into Salt? Should I put every bit of configuration for every application, even if it's just a single instance, or are there some things I would want to configure outside of the Salt system?
I would tend to put as much as possible into Salt because it makes it much easier to replicate the setup elsewhere if you need a second host, or if your machine dies or stuff like that. It removes a lot of the pain of setting up a new machine. I mean, when you start using it, you put things like one by one from the local config into the config management, but because you're not starting from scratch. But I think it makes sense to put as much as possible in the config management tool.
Yeah, to answer that question, I would really ask the question, do you ever think you might reasonably want to have a staging and or development environment with these things in?
Yeah.
If the answer to that is no, then maybe you're okay with just having a backup of that host, but in general, just put everything in. It's just less work.
Does Salt have any ability to run with a multiple master configuration, either for, like, say, horizontal scaling of the master in case you have a huge number of minions, or for like a high availability sort of configuration?
Martin says yes. I'm not familiar with this because I've never needed it with like our setup, but
There's, I don't know what it's called, but one of the tools is just simply a bouncer. So you would set it up central host, and then you would bounce it to like 15, and they would then control 20,000 minions each or something.
I think we're out of time. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming, and have a nice day.